The U.S. turning the corner on COVID. What goes up must come down. A Chinese rocket crashing to Earth this weekend, and no one knows where. And Love, Hate, 8 Mother's Day edition. Friday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Friday, May 7th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hello, Carlo.
Happy Friday, Jill. Okay, one last follow-up to your high school Hall of Fame. Now, I know that we talked about whether you got a trophy about being in the Hall of Fame at your high school. Now, my question is, do you also get a title? Like, you know how when you're knighted by the Queen, you get to go by Sir or I think Lady? Like, are you like the Duchess of Jericho High School, or is there a different name we can call you?
Only in my household. Am I the Duchess of Jericho High School? Everywhere else, it's like Jill who. So no, nothing. And by the way, we didn't get a trophy. I don't know if I answered that yesterday correctly, but I did not get a trophy. By the way,
face is on the wall.
I left for work this morning, and my husband goes, "Happy Freitag," and I was
Yes.
waiting for you to say it.
Yes. Love it.
Okay, so let's start with some good news here. The U.S. now at the best place that we've been since October in terms of new COVID cases, with daily infections finally breaking below 50,000, hospitalizations down to about 40,000. Deaths are hovering around 700 a day. The FDA's emergency approval for the Pfizer vaccine in kids as young as 12, that could come as soon as today or early next week. Nearly 150 million Americans have now had at least one shot, or about 45% of the population. The bad news, though, of course, is overseas. India is still just shattering these daily records when it comes to cases and deaths. 415,000 new cases, about 4,000 deaths over just the last 24 hours. So a really just continuously dire situation there.
I don't know when they're going to be able to hit the apex. It just seems like it's just going up. I guess just 'cause there's so many people there, right? There was this interesting new analysis out of the University of Washington yesterday. I just wanted to make note of that suggested the global death toll from coronavirus something along the lines of twice the official count. The U.S. death toll, according to this analysis, probably closer to 905,000. That would be about 38% higher than the current estimate, which would also put us above the toll of the 1918 Spanish flu. So again, I don't even know if we'll ever really have the full toll, but there's really no question, I think, at this point that it's higher than what the official numbers say. This is interesting. Here in New York City, we're going to start offering tourists free vaccines. They're going to have mobile clinics with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine at tourist places like the Empire State Building and in Times Square. Hopefully that'll do something to get some more people vaccinated. Just in terms of vaccinations, I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Kara Swisher, the one that she does for the New York Times. I think it's called Sway. And she was interviewing Frank Luntz, who's that Republican pollster. You've probably seen him. He's like always all over the place. Smart guy. And she was asking him about, what he thinks in terms of how to get more people vaccinated. And he's a pollster, right? So he's all about messaging. And he was talking about how, again, was something we've been saying forever, right? The messaging is still so bad. He was like, vaccine passports are a great example, right? That's something that polls terribly. People on the left see it one way. People on the right see it as this like infringement on your freedoms. But he's like, if you just change the words and if you call it vaccine verification, by a 4-to-1 margin, people are down with it, right? So it's just, again, right? It's all about the messaging. It's just and just how we frame these things. So if you just say, yeah, we need your vaccine verification, people are totally okay with that. But when you say, hey, we need your vaccine passport, people are like, whoa there, hang on.
What kind of passport do you think I need?
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Like anything, though, because when you even think about the debate about guns, calling for tighter gun laws, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about guns a bit later, but calling it gun control is just not good.
Terrible.
That is a terrible name. Yes. Also, pro-life or pro-choice. Like, terrible. So if I'm pro-choice, I'm anti-life. I mean,
exactly.
I completely agree. Just the messaging on some of these things is terrible.
I've always said gun control. The liberals should call gun control massacre prevention. Right? That
100%.
That's the terminology we want to use.
Florida, by the way, the latest state to enact controversial new voting restrictions, an unusual move. Governor Ron DeSantis giving Fox News exclusive access to that bill signing ceremony and barring other outlets from covering the event. So Florida's law makes it much more difficult to cast mail-in ballots by severely limiting drop boxes, among other things. And by the way, Fox News has come out to say this was not some sort of arrangement that they had. They did not ask for an exclusive. So they're just trying to kind of distance themselves from this.
Yeah, I think that he's trying to thumb his nose at sort of the quote unquote mainstream media. At the same time, lawmakers in Texas last night approving new voter restrictions. They go even further than this Florida law. Part of this law would ban election officials from mailing out absentee ballot applications, full stop. Also giving partisan poll watchers even more power in terms of like watching people fill out ballots and videotaping them. That's like a recipe for voter intimidation, in my opinion. And it also comes as the Texas Senate passed a new law that would allow people in that state to carry a concealed handgun without a permit. So, I mean, talk about a recipe for something, right? The combination of those two things, I think. I don't know.
Back to just DeSantis quickly. When asked why Florida needed new voting laws, he said, well, people just don't trust that elections are secure. But this is all just such circular logic in terms of what's happening in this country in terms of voting laws. Because the reason people don't trust the results is because the former president made up a lie that the election was stolen from him. And judge after judge looked at the data and rejected it, including Trump-appointed judges. And Florida, Georgia, Arizona, Texas, of so many states, they're basically trying to solve this problem that just doesn't really exist and was actually created by the former president.
Yes, thank you for making that point. That's exactly what it is. It's all circular reasoning, right? There's allegations. There were always the allegations of massive voter fraud were always just allegations that there were allegations of massive voter fraud. If you throw out something that serious of an allegation that the election was stolen, you better have some really serious evidence to back it up. And there never has been anything. I mean, I don't know. Have you been following what's going on in Arizona? They're doing an audit of the vote there, and they're talking about how they're looking for shards of bamboo because they think that China had come in and dropped off a bunch of fake ballots. It's like, what are we doing, folks? Everybody needs to, like, I don't know, go outside and take a breath or something, because this is really out of control. And
again, it's like, why? So you again think that the only issue was with the top of the ticket, so that people, the only fraudulent part of the ballot was the top of the ticket for president, but that the senators and the Republicans that picked up seats, those elections were fine. The down, the down ballot elections were fine. It just doesn't really makes sense. Anyway, we just mentioned guns, Carlo, and I wanted to mention a 6th grade girl brought a handgun to her middle school in Idaho and shot 2 students and a janitor before she was disarmed by one of her teachers. Fortunately, the 3 victims are expected to survive their injuries. The shooting happened at Rigby Middle School in the small town of Rigby, just the latest in a string of mass shootings this year. But this one, it's really a 6th grade girl. This is not... I hope this is not the start of a new trend of these mass shooting happening with younger people, and it's primarily been men who've been the perpetrators, and I hope this is not the start of something.
Boys, really. How old are you in 6th grade? 12?
11.
12, 13? 11.
Yeah, 11.
God, 11? Oh my God, it's like too much, right? This broke my heart. Another 6th grade girl from that middle school telling the local newspaper there, her name was Lucy Long, saying that the school went into lockdown for an active shooter, which every school in America now knows is just part of the drill, part of life here. She immediately took out her phone and she pressed record, just in case the shooter came in and killed her and everybody in that room, the police would at least have a record of what happened. So that is what 6th graders in America are now trained to do. It's just heartbreaking.
On to some economic news. The number of Americans seeking unemployment fell below 500,000 last week for the first time since the start of the pandemic. It's an encouraging sign that the labor market continues to find its footing. the rate of 498,000 new jobless claims, it's still much higher than the pre-COVID level. We were getting about 230,000 per week. Again, these are first-time unemployment claims. But it's been falling fast since that peak in January. There are more open jobs now in the United States than there were before the pandemic, but there are fewer people in the workforce, and there are more and more concerns about a labor shortage.
Yeah, you're hearing about. I mean, I hear about it anecdotally now, but you're also there's a big story in the Wall Street Journal about it today. It's especially apparent in sectors like hospitality, manufacturing, construction. But we're going to get the jobs report for April later on today. By the time you listen to this, it probably already will have come out. It's going to be a monster. I think everybody's expecting 1 million jobs added for the month. If you're in the hospitality industry, by the way, I only say this because I know people. It's just such a big industry here in New York, and I have a lot of friends who are in it. From what I heard, that market is so tight that you may be able to like negotiate, maybe a better salary, maybe better perks, maybe a better schedule. It is really a like job applicants market from everything that I've gathered.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Restaurants, the restaurant industry in particular, which falls into that bucket, are reporting a shortage of workers. Some restaurants barely survived the pandemic, and hospitality in general barely surviving the pandemic. Now restaurants limiting hours in some cases, closing on certain days because they just don't have the staff. There are a lot of reasons for this. And it's not fully clear why, but a lot of people are blaming the very generous unemployment benefits, which make it, in some cases, a lot more lucrative for workers, or just even they could break even for people to just stay home and not work. So why would you in many cases? But others say these workers still don't feel safe to go back. So if they have enough money that they can live and they're not going to make much more by going back to work, if you don't feel safe, why would you go? Either way, a huge problem for the industry, a huge problem for the country. Perhaps it will drive up wages, as you say, and it will give room to negotiate. But you're talking about these businesses that were barely able to survive.
Yeah, it's certainly something to keep an eye on. I have a feeling that this is not going to be one of those long-term issues, if for no other reason than these enhanced unemployment benefits expire in September, and they're not going to be extended again. So I think this summer could be dicey for some of these restaurants and bars and hospitality businesses for sure. But I mean, eventually people are going to come back to the workforce.
We'll see. I mean, that'll be the test, right? If they expire in September, and that's when you start to see workers flooding back, you'll kind of have your answer. But is it going to be too late? For restaurants who have to close a full day of the week, I mean, that's basically where you're going to make profit. It's a rough situation. This is sort of an in-the-weeds story, but it's just kind of funny. If you are a Berkshire Hathaway investor and you've tried to check the stock price this week, you may have noticed that it doesn't show up on many of the finance sites. And that's because the price of one Class A share of Berkshire, which is the holding company controlled by Warren Buffett, that's trading above the top price that the NASDAQ's computers were actually built to handle. So the biggest number that the NASDAQ systems can handle is 429,496.7295. Berkshire trading above 435,000 a share. NASDAQ says it hopes to have a fix for that issue soon.
Yeah, I know this is kind of a stupid story if nobody cares, but I just thought it was so interesting.
I'm surprised you put this in, but all good.
I loved it. But yeah, Warren Buffett, the reason why that stock is so high, Warren Buffett famously has always declined to ever split the stock, which is what these companies do when their stock price gets so high so that you can get more, regular investors. And he's always said that he doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want amateur investors coming in and speculating. So he created Class B shares where regular investors can own a piece of that company. But Berkshire, by the way, that stock up 20% year to date. That company absolutely crushing it. And Warren Buffett, man, that guy, I don't know how old he is, but he just continues to do his thing. The old Oracle of Omaha, as they call him.
Okay, Google, by the way, flipping the switch on two-factor authentication as the default setting for all Google accounts soon. So this means that if you have a Gmail account, you're either going to need to configure 2FA if you haven't already, or you can opt out. Google says this extra step in which a code is sent to your phone before you log in is critical given how many people use the same passwords for basically everything.
This announcement coming on World Password Day yesterday. This is part of Google's plans for what it says is, quote, a future where one day you won't need a password at all, which I think we can all agree is a future that we want. But this is a big deal. Just, I guess how many active Gmail users there are in the world?
I don't know.
Throw a number out.
Active? Active.
Active Gmail users.
A billion?
Well, 1.8 billion. It's a lot of people. It's like 1 in 5 people in the world uses Gmail on a regular basis. So this is, this is big. But two-factor, I have it set up on mine. It's a big pain in the butt, but it's not as big as a pain in the butt, big of a pain in the butt as just remembering passwords. And the password situation really is like out of control. I mean, the systems that our company uses, I don't want to throw them under the bus here, but it's just like you have to change your password every few months, and it has to always be, it can't be something that you ever used before, and there's always these new rules. So you end up just having like a document that has all your passwords in it, which is probably like the least safe thing you could have. So I think two-factor is great if they can ditch the password, but just having it with the password, it's a little much, right?
Two-factor is such a pain. It is such a pain. I have it set up on a few of my accounts, and every time I do, I'm like, oh, why did I ever set up two-factor authorization? It's just the worst.
Especially if your phone's not anywhere.
Exactly,
like
exactly.
Yeah,
but as you say, better than getting your account hacked and whatnot. So if you're out and about enjoying the spring weather this weekend, keep an eye on the sky. The largest part of a Chinese rocket that launched the country's first space station last week is expected to plunge to Earth probably sometime tomorrow, maybe Sunday. And no one really knows where it's going. So the U.S. Space Command now tracking the discarded rocket as it looks to make its re-entry. The Pentagon has said it's going to have a better idea of where it's going to land a few hours before, assuming that the debris doesn't burn up in the atmosphere. What a weird thing.
A lot of weird news today. But this usually happens soon after a rocket launches, right? A rocket launches in like whatever they call that thing, the part of it, the booster, I guess, it falls into the ocean typically. This one somehow got pulled into the Earth's orbit. So that's the issue why it's still up there and why it's now going to come crashing down to Earth. The Chinese, shockingly, have not been very forthcoming about it, which is why nobody really knows why, when, and where it's coming. But it's nothing really to worry about. I mean, it's probably going to land in the Pacific Ocean because, as any elementary school student remembers, most of the world is the ocean, and the Pacific Ocean is the biggest.
All right, one other quick thing. Elon Musk is going to be on SNL this weekend.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
There's a lot of people watching the price of Dogecoin and other cryptos because those are open for trade and open for buying and selling. Obviously, they don't operate when markets are open. So Monday, this time on Monday, it could be a lot different story for those.
Isn't that funny, though, that like the SNL like cold open is now like a market indicator?
It's
right?
Only this week. I mean, it's only because it's Elon Musk.
No, I know. It's just everything the crypto stuff is so crazy. It's like nothing makes any sense. The world's upside down.
Okay, Carla, let's do a little Love, Hate, 8 Mother's Day edition. One thing that we love, that this year we can actually see our moms on Mother's Day in person and give them a hug.
Absolutely. Yeah. Last Mother's Day was a rough one, right? We were still in lockdown mode, at least here in New York. That is a great love. I like that one. The one that I was going to do this week, which is sort of similar, is, and this is something that I've been trying to do for a long time, and sometimes I forget, but it's a really good exercise. So I'm going to tell everybody, it's writing down one thing that we're grateful for every day. It is the cheapest and best form of therapy out there. So try and do it right before bed. I just do it in like the notes app of my phone. I'm serious. It really works. And one of the things I'm grateful for today, my mom. So I'm going to put that in the notes app. And Jill, you've been in there before. Our listeners have been in there before. It can be anything. It could be one day I was grateful for the UPS guy for delivering something on time. So yeah, if you're feeling down, I highly recommend that little trick.
I used to do that, and I think I thank you for suggesting it again, because I think I might want to do that. I used to say I was grateful for coffee some days, and it is what it is. Like whatever you're grateful for, you're grateful for.
Yeah.
One thing that we hate, that anyone thinks mothers actually enjoy Mother's Day. We're either hosting our family, we're schlepping out to our family, packing up the cars if we're going away for a week. It's basically the opposite of a day at the spa, which is what everyone thinks it is.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Should I get Becky something for Mother's Day this year? or do like even though she's not technically a mother yet? I probably should.
Why don't you, seeing that you haven't yet, why don't you just go with flowers?
Okay. You can't go wrong with flowers, right?
No, flowers are always nice.
Okay.
And it looks like it was like this very premeditated thing that you planned for a long time. So hopefully Becky is not listening.
Becky's still asleep, thankfully. Okay, and one thing that we ate, a giant breakfast in bed for Mom just before the kids get up. Which reminds me of one of my favorite Onion articles, which I won't repeat because it's not appropriate.
Oh, do tell. I don't even know what you're even referring to.
I'll text it to you.
I giggle at this one, the giant breakfast in bed for Mom, because it's like that is something that I think only happens in sitcoms where the kids come in with this big tray, or like the husband comes with the big tray, fresh squeezed orange juice, pancakes. I don't know. No. I don't think that has ever happened in real life anywhere. So if any of our listeners, if that's happened to you or if you've done that for your mom, I'd love to hear about it. Certainly does not happen in my house. Although the one thing my husband and I do actually do is we bring each other coffee in bed. So if I get up first, which I usually do, I bring my husband coffee in bed. But he has been stepping it up always. Well, he steps it up all the time, but he's been bringing me a lot of coffee too. And it helps get the day started.
Absolutely. Good work, Mike. Okay, but before we go, Jill, happy Mother's Day to you. Happy Mother's Day to my mom, all the moms out there. This has been a hell of a year. We could not have done it without you guys. Seriously. Like, you guys are the absolute heroes of COVID. And also just for everyone whose mom has passed, or people who are moms and whose children have passed. I know this is a really tough holiday for you guys. And we're thinking about you too.
And women who are struggling with infertility. And
sure.
I'm glad you mentioned it because it can be a tough day. But I second that. Happy Mother's Day to my mom and all the moms out there. Happy pre-Mother's Day to Becky. Very excited for you guys. And all the listeners out there, enjoy it. That's what you need to know for Friday, May 7th.
Have a great weekend, guys.